I make Tesla coils.
I make t-shirt cannons.
We make bent circuits.
I make rockets.
We make robots.
I make projection.
I make catapults.
I make sculpture.
My name is Ali Momeni, and I make large-scale projections on buildings and mountains. At the heart of our setup for the mobile broadcast units, there is a small and very bright projector, a laptop computer running real-time software to generate the video, and a gestural controller. Here we go. This is nice.
It is.
I wanted, in my vision, to have an army of bicycles with an army of projectors just shedding light, making ephemeral art happen all over. I got to Minneapolis in August of last year, and I was looking for a project that would bring the university closer to the community outside the university. I wanted something that would have traction in terms of its research value, something really hip and involving a lot of different media, but something also that people outside can see and admire and interact with. I viewed Minneapolis Art on Wheels as a public arts effort, as a mobile art making unit. Minneapolis is a bike town. So the idea of taking art and bringing it out into the community on wheels was a really natural fit. We started with 3 bikes. The bikes were based on the design from the graffiti research labs. They have a similar model of going out and projecting laser tag graffiti on walls, which to me was an aesthetically really beautiful idea, this ephemeral art that you can produce anywhere in an urban setting, and as soon as you stop, it's gone.
The Graffiti Research Lab came up with the idea of putting the projector on the bike. But the bikes were originally designed to be vendor carts, and we modified them to mount a pole to use as a mobile projection. They're quick to set up. We can set up in about 10 minutes. The first thing we do is we put the projector up on the pole. Then after the projector's on the pole, then we start looking for power sources. We usually use a generator, but sometimes we can pirate other sources of electricity through the grid. The bikes are a really odd thing to see coming down the street, so a lot of people gather to these bikes. And this has worked out really well for us in drawing people together.
We found very quickly when projecting things on the street that projecting white text in the dark in public places is a really powerful thing. It kind of gives you a voice that can combat billboards or other forms of propaganda at that scale.
A few of us are really particularly attracted to the idea of using them as tools for community engagement. And they're really practical for that because they do have this real sort of physical presence. As you're riding on the street, everyone wants to see it. They're curious about what's happening. And also just the fact that they make a huge projection on the side of a wall that all sorts of people can see. Another interactive tool that we have is a light board that allows you to draw sort of real time. So you essentially, it's like drawing on a whiteboard. You just draw and then the projector puts that up on the wall. So that really allows people to immediately do something with the bike.
In mid-May of this year, we got a truck. We put the 3 big bikes in the truck. We got together a caravan of 4 cars. The idea for me was putting together a huge road trip going all across America.
And the trip was just like boot camp for this whole project.
I especially liked the time we spent in the Badlands of interior South Dakota. Just to be able to cover gigantic, massive landforms in light was pretty spectacular.
What we learned on this trip is that we don't need a wall to project on. Trees work, sand dunes work, anything that bounces light, and that's more or less anything but a black hole, seems to work. Those bikes are really wonderful tools. But it's not the most practical way to get around if you're going to go up hills and go to far away places or on dirt roads.
This will be fine. We decided to build a backpack unit to increase the mobility of the project, to be able to move from one site to another. We started by finding this external frame backpack that houses the powering system, which consists of a battery and inverter. The projector is mounted with this variable friction magic arm that clamps onto the external frame. And the laptop is held with this stadium seat that we extended the straps on so it can be mounted in the front. So we had been using this clamp attachment to mount the projector, but come up with something a little more secure, mounting a plate to the already existing mount. And then the sides of the projector will be able to be held and maneuvered in any way.
When it comes to projections, there's a lot of ways to come up with content to project onto a wall. When I bike around, my eyes are looking for those big white walls that are dark and accessible with an area in front of them where we could set up. Because any wall for us is a canvas waiting to happen. It's important to have in the studio a place where you can kind of mimic what you're going to do outside the studio. And so now for me, these 3 screens represent the 3 projectors, and this span of 4 feet represents something like 200 feet that I'm working with. And as a result, as I make my instrument and as I practice this instrument in this studio, I'm trying to keep aware of the fact that these distances are modeling much bigger distances in the real world. One thing that I've always been interested in is the idea of dealing with an orchestra of little organisms, if you call it that you direct from high above. So the idea here is, imagine you have a little thing like this and you make up very simple rules for it. You tell it it's going to go straight until it hits a wall and then it goes right. Very simple for one of them, but now if you take 1,000 of these and throw it in a box, you get this kind of behavior that gets very complex, but you can still control it from high above because each individual is really simple. So now here's an example of this kind of thing put into an instrument that I've made. I use a gestural controller here. This idea of controlling real-time video with gesture is also really central to this whole thing. This particular instrument is a multi-point touch screen, so there are a bunch of interface items on here that I move around, and as I move things around on this screen, there's software that translates my gestures to the movement of these little agents. So here's, for instance, one mode where all these letters are emanating from that center point, and I kind of change their behavior and the directions they're headed and the forces that they're subject to. My history is in music, actually, and what I did in music was, as a composer, I worked on building instruments that can translate gestures into sound. So I was always very interested, considering that this thing, the laptop, is my main instrument, how you translate the movements of your body into flow of numbers that can then turn into sound. So in music school, I built all these gestural instruments, and that was always very compelling to me, how interacting with media with your gesture works. People get it, it's effective, it's satisfying, and it could be very expressive. The ideal for Minneapolis Art on Wheels, in my mind, is for it to be a paintbrush. It's a tool for engaging the communities through art, caring about what happens in your neighborhood, and having a voice that's really magnified thanks to this technology.
I just love talking with people out on the streets, just random people that don't necessarily expect us to be where we are or be doing what we are.
To be able to be super mobile, to put words where words haven't been and words where words don't belong, and to just be able to do it everywhere, anytime.
The thing that excites me is that with a projector that can be mobile and a sound system, you can claim a public space. You can show up a scene, and within 10 minutes you can have access, you can leverage the question of scale to the point where you're present, you're part of the architecture.